Will CJ Gardner-Johnson be a trick or treat for the Chicago Bears this Halloween? We'll break down his role in Dennis Allen's defense, the concerns about maybe in the locker room, and a whole lot more on today's Locked On Bears podcast.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like the players, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. So stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. On the show today, we're breaking down the newest member of the Chicago Bears defense, CJ Gardner-Johnson, a bit of a controversial figure in the NFL. One of those guys that oftentimes you hate him when he's on the other team, but you don't mind him when he's on your team until in some of his previous stops, it becomes a little bit too much to handle and they move on. The Bears are his, fourth team in the last calendar year. We'll break down the good and the bad, why he could be a great fit and some much needed reinforcements in this Bears secondary, but also some real locker room concerns and maybe even on the field discipline type of concerns as well. And then we'll wrap up checking in on another brutal Chicago Bears injury report where some key guys on both sides of the ball still aren't practicing and are very much in doubt or up in the air for Sunday's game. But let's start with the X's and O's on the field here for CJ Gardner-Johnson, because he's somebody who is coming in to provide some much needed reinforcements at a spot where the Bears are particularly banged up, right? Yes, I mean, I think he's listed as a safety on the free agent lists and stuff, but he's coming to Chicago to be a slot cornerback. He is going to fill in Kyler Gordon's role in the nickel package, at least while he's gone, and allow them to have, to not have Nick McLeod playing in the slot. And presumably, if Tyreek Stevenson returns on Sunday, you'll have Stevenson and Wright on the outside, and then CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot there. And you really feel a lot more confident about that group than the group that we saw last week against the Ravens, where Jalen Jones and Nashawn Wright are playing on the outside, and Nick McLeod is in the slot. They had McLeod play inside and out. He can kind of do both, but I much prefer that as a backup option on the bench and not starting and on the field for every snap against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and a Bengals passing offense that certainly is loaded up with weapons, even if we're not sure if it's going to be Jake Browning or Joe Flacco at quarterback because of the injury situation there. It still scares you almost no matter who's under center with those guys out there against a potential backup cornerbacks for you. But CJ Gardner-Johnson comes in with, there's no doubting that he'll be an upgrade. How much of an upgrade, I think, is certainly debatable, but it's a real plug-and-play type of move because the New Orleans Saints drafted him when Dennis Allen was, I believe, head coach in 2019 in the fourth round. He spent his first 3 seasons there before he went to Philadelphia and had led the NFL with 6 interceptions that season, and then spent some time in Detroit with Ben Johnson on the other side of the ball in 2023, then back to Philadelphia, and then with Houston this season, and I think he was with Philadelphia again, and now he's on the open market and comes to the Chicago Bears. But Dennis Allen seems pretty darn confident that they can plug CJ Gardner-Johnson right in, and that not that he's going to be 100% up to date on the scheme, but that he's got a pretty strong familiarity from where they left off in New Orleans.
Kevin Byard told us yesterday that Gardner-Johnson took all the reps in yesterday's practice. Where is his comfortability right now in your scheme?
I think there's some recall in terms of, what we've done with him before. I think that was kind of the plan kind of coming in is let's try to force feed some of the information to him, force feed some of these reps to him, and then, see where he's at. And so yesterday was a step in the right direction in that regard. We'll see how it goes today. Today's more of a third down emphasis. So we'll just monitor that, see how it goes throughout the week. And then, obviously we'll make some decisions as we get closer to the end of the week.
How similar is your scheme today to what it was from 2019 to 21 with them?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of carryover. I think there's a lot of similarity, and yet there's some things that are different. Some things we're doing, new. I think every year you have to evolve a little bit. I don't think you can just, throw the playbook down at each and every year and say this is what we do. You have a starting point, you have a foundation, and yet, each and every year is going to be different because each year you have a different unit. So you try to find out what you're able to do well. Try to emphasize those things as much as you can, and try to, stay away from some of the things that you might not be quite as good at. And I think each year that changes. From a foundation standpoint, I think there's a lot of similarities.
It's not like Dennis Allen's defense is full of super complicated stuff. I think for somebody like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, it's more about they tweak terminology every year, so that you're not using the same words so that players just know be on your team can scout what you're doing, So it's just like updating more like little things like that. But I think I certainly have full confidence, and we heard Gardner-Johnson himself say he's got full confidence he'll be good to go and be essentially full speed on Sunday. What I like most about the move, and I'm not even here to say CJ Gardner-Johnson's been available for weeks now, and the Bears only now bring him in because of Kyler Gordon. Overall, if I had to evaluate the move, I think it's a worthwhile risk, and it's a fine move, and I'm glad they did something. It's just maybe not, you don't love it all around for some of the stuff we'll talk about in a moment here. But what I do like most about it, and let me rephrase that. What I like most about the Chicago Bears signing CJ Gardner-Johnson is that it doesn't have to just be a short-term Kyler Gordon replacement and then you discard him and move on, or move him to the bench or release him or whatever it's going to be. This is a player who, while Gordon is on injured reserve, and we don't know whether that's going to be a 4-week stay or an 8-week stay, if it's a soft tissue thing, so we just don't know what the timeline is going to be. While he's on injured reserve, he's your slot cornerback. You're good to go there. Once Kyler Gordon comes back, you've got some options. You could leave Gardner-Johnson in the slot and then play Gordon as the outside cornerback opposite Tyreek Stevenson, and maybe you feel like that's getting your best cornerbacks on the field. Or you could see somebody like Gardner-Johnson move into this third safety hybrid role that Dennis Allen likes to use. Because after Gardner-Johnson left the Saints, when he was with the Eagles and had 6 interceptions in 2 different seasons, he played more of a true safety type of role. He's been a slot cornerback, he's been a strong safety, he's been a free safety. He can do a little bit of everything. And we saw through the first 4 games of the season, at least, Dennis Allen was using Bears backup safety Jonathan Owens as a third safety in dime packages. He was getting 8 or 9 snaps a game as an extra defensive back when they really wanted to go light and have a lot of DBs out there to cover really good receivers, teams like the Lions and Vikings that have talent at receiver that, you just want to have extra coverage guys more so than extra, guys in the box. Gardner-Johnson could continue to have a role, not as the primary slot cornerback, but as that sort of 6th defensive back dime player. That's not a major role, but it still is playing time in every game, and maybe something that Dennis Allen could expand with a player like Gardner-Johnson that he knows better and maybe trusts a little bit more, and is certainly, I think, probably more talented than Jonathan Owens, just as someone who's had more success across his NFL career. I think the bigger question might be, does Gardner-Johnson last that long in Chicago? Because he wasn't lasting very long in his previous stops. 3 games in Houston before he was released. Barely spent much time in Philadelphia this season. He's been around the block a little bit because he hasn't necessarily fit into locker room cultures. And that's the big question mark, and I honestly the big concern about the Bears signing CJ Gardner-Johnson. So we'll go through some of the different dynamics at play here, and we'll hear defensive coordinator Dennis Allen share his thoughts on CJ Gardner-Johnson's maturity and how that maybe has changed over the years. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. And when I think back to the Bears' loss against the Ravens, the one drive that the Bears finished in the end zone, there was a moment in there that I think really moved things forward. The adjustment that really opened things up. When Caleb Williams checks a play at the line of scrimmage, gets into DeAndre Swift running a screen. They throw it over the pass rush, that blitz that had been getting after Caleb all day, and Swift catches it and runs for 25 yards. And it's that big chunk play that gets the offense going, gets it into a rhythm, into a groove, and they finally finish a drive with 7 instead of 3 and retake the lead at 16-13. Or no, they bring the game closer to 16-13, and give you a fighter's chance in that fourth quarter. Like, those are the kind of things that it was more than just one big play. It was a momentum swing, and it was really a game-changing moment to keep the Bears in that game. And when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. We're loving the NFL season so far, but the NBA is back now too, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. So you say, hey, they're going to come back and win, and this player is going to score this many points in the fourth quarter, and they're going to hold the opponent to under this many points. However you want to do it, it keeps the game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So I have no doubts that C.J. Gardner-Johnson is going to come into the Bears secondary, be an upgrade in the slot for sure. I don't think he's going to be the 6 interception guy he was for 2 separate seasons in Philadelphia. Again, those 6 interception seasons came while playing safety as a slot cornerback in New Orleans. He had 3 in 2021, but again, I'm not expecting like dominating, game-changing playmaking, just a lot more consistency they can trust in the slot. But I worry about the more like, I don't want to say off-field impacts because it can still be on the field, but like outside of the whistles impact on C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think we all are generally familiar with his history of both generating but also, causing personal foul flags, unnecessary roughness, unsportsmanlike conduct stuff. This is a player who gets into opponents' heads and sometimes loses his cool too. I think we all remember Javon Wims, Chicago Bears wide receiver. I don't know if punch or slap is the right word, but striking C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the helmet a couple times when the Bears played the Saints. I think there was also an incident with Anthony Miller a number of years back as well, where this guy says the right things and makes opponents mad. And you love it when he's on your team doing it to them, where you gain the 15-yard penalty because they were the ones who got flagged. But also, this is a player who has gotten flagged plenty on his own if he says the wrong thing and referees hear him, or he's the one who, sometimes receivers can get in his head and the trash talking kind of goes 2 ways and he might be the one who swings every once in a while. And then the penalties are hurting your team. And we have certainly seen already penalties hurting the Chicago Bears. Like the joke was when they signed him, it's like, great, what'll solve the Bears' 11 penalties against the Baltimore Ravens? More penalties from C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Like I think there's 2 aspects of that, right? There's the one, penalties on the field hurting your team. And then there's the 2, culture fit in the locker room. And I always want to be careful around these sorts of culture fit conversations because I think sometimes this conversation can get veiled in some dog whistle stuff. But there is real concrete reporting about C.J. Gardner-Johnson that I feel more comfortable talking about and rolling with than just like, is he a bad apple or, a bad influence or whatever. Like that's usually like kind of BS and, there's not a lot to substantiate that. But there was some real reporting about why C.J. Gardner-Johnson left the Houston Texans. And it certainly wasn't all about on-field play. Part of it was on-field play. DeMeco Ryans at the time earlier this season had some quotes about how, there was busts in communication on the back end of the defense. They need to be better. We need to communicate better and execute better. And he didn't necessarily specifically call out C.J. Gardner-Johnson by name, but he said those things right after C.J. Gardner-Johnson had been out of position on a coverage bus. It was very much saying like, hey, he's not doing a good enough job communicating on the back end. But I think clearly I think worse than that were the reports that in the Texans locker room, CJ Gardner-Johnson was not only like requesting a trade, but like demanding that they blitz more and that they use him differently and that the defensive coordinator isn't doing things right and they're not being aggressive enough. And then it starts criticizing his teammates. And particularly, I think we can all piece together that it was Jalen Petre, one of the other defensive backs, essentially saying, you're making all this money and you're not earning it. You're not good enough. I'm better. The idea is like, I'm better than you and you're getting all this money. Why are they paying you all this money to not be good? Like stuff that feels very toxic to a locker room. Like enough that the Texans said, we don't want you anymore. Enough that he hasn't been able to stick on a team this season. Enough that most teams have been unwilling to roster him. And I think from a Chicago Bears perspective, they feel like the one team that was always most likely to sign him. I don't want to say the one team that can handle him the best, but perhaps the team that is most prepared to handle him, because in theory, Dennis Allen knows exactly what they're getting. Before they sign CJ Gardner-Johnson, he will know exactly what he's like in the locker room, how hard he works at practice, how he carries himself in team meetings, what his demeanor is like on the sideline. Like Dennis Allen should know what this player offers through and through. He was around him for 3 years in New Orleans. I realize that was 4 years ago, but certainly that was a 22, 23, and 24-year-old CJ Gardner-Johnson. We can assume he has grown a bit as a player since then, and Dennis Allen himself lended some voice to that, hey, maybe there's been some maturation over the years.
He has a reputation of being a guy who can get under players' skin, obviously. You coached him in New Orleans. What's your say in terms of what makes him an aggressive player, but also walking that fine line?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think he's a highly competitive player. And I think he goes out there and competes on every single play. And so that's fully what I would expect for him to do, with us. So I think he brings a little attitude to the football team, which I think is good.
Is he a different player now from maybe a couple years ago? Maybe maturing with age or whatever it might be?
I think we all mature with age. You know what I mean? Like, I think all of us, we make some mistakes as we're younger and we kind of learn from them and we kind of move on. I've seen a player that's matured a little bit, and yet he still has that fiery attitude, which I think that's what makes him who he is.
I'm sure it's very likely, if not certain, that CJ Gardner-Johnson has grown and matured since he was 22, 23, and 24 years old. I will buy that, but it wasn't exactly evident earlier this season in Houston. And that's where, perhaps he has matured and grown, but that doesn't mean there aren't still concerns. And I think both of these things can be true, that yes, he is probably not the same as he was at 22, but he also still has real concerns coming over from Houston. And there's a real question of how long will he last in Chicago? He made it 3 games in Houston. Now, I think it certainly is a real factor that Houston was 0-3 across those 3 games. And I find it to be pretty universally true among most, quote unquote, troublesome players, that when you're winning, they don't really cause problems. And when you're losing, they're upset that they're losing and causing problems. But that generally, as long as the team is winning, they don't have very much to complain about or cause problems about. So everything is fine. And so that may honestly be the single biggest factor here of do you beat the Bengals or not on Sunday? And then you got the Giants after that. Do you beat the Giants or not? And, if you lose both of those games, for example, then maybe CJ Gardner-Johnson starts to have some, discontent. We'll put it nicely. And if you win both these games, we might not hear a peep out of him. Maybe he draws a penalty out of somebody, and that's it. I mean, I think the penalty thing with CJ is a little bit overblown, just in terms of the volume of penalties. Last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, he played 1,170 snaps. Essentially, almost every single snap the entire season. He had 2 penalties all of last year. Now, the year before that in Detroit, he had 3 penalties in about 300 snaps. So, I mean, there's some up and down there. But in Philly the year before that, 2 penalties in 872 snaps. I think if you're winning, he doesn't get a lot of penalties. Now, back in his New Orleans times, he had, 5 penalties, 9 penalties, 7 penalties each of, across the 3 seasons there. So that was a thing for him. But we're not seeing this guy being a penalty machine for his own team lately. So I'm a little less worried about that. A little less worried because I think Dennis Allen knows how to handle this. Ben Johnson knows how to handle this. I'm just not sure about the actual, we don't know how strong the player leadership is in the Bears locker room, especially because at a press conference this week, Ben Johnson was talking about the penalties and said the leaders in the locker room have to step up to stop the penalties. He called out his locker room leaders for not being good enough about penalties. So if the locker room leadership is perhaps insufficient in that area, I'm a little bit nervous about throwing CJ Gardner-Johnson in there, but I do think CJ Gardner-Johnson can also add some energy, some intensity, some aggressiveness, and some spark that maybe this defense could use a little bit more of. I think there could be a real benefit there of these guys playing a little bit higher energy. They have a lot of soft-spoken guys. Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, even Jaquan Brisker off the field at least is very soft-spoken. I think he's a little more of a trash talker on the field, but this is not a fiery Bears defense. And maybe CJ Gardner-Johnson's fire can be a good thing up until it crosses that line, and that's what we're going to be watching for closely here. Also going to be watching closely to see just how healthy the Bears are for this Bengals game, because the injury report does not look good. So we're going to break down who's missing practice and how the Bears might adjust for that on Sunday next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Rugiet. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've heard them all before. It's just stress. I'm tired. It happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. The process is fast, simple, and private. It's handled by real doctors, 100% online. No awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. Visit Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL to get 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET. Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNFL so they know we sent you. Rugiet. Stop making excuses and start making moves. CJ Gardner-Johnson comes in as reinforcements for the injuries at cornerback, but just as they seem to be getting even a little bit healthy at that position, the injuries are mounting elsewhere again. And, it's the nature of the NFL. Everybody's banged up, but it feels like the Bears keep getting them in sort of like concentrated spaces, right? Right now, it was 5 cornerbacks all missing last week with Johnson, Stevenson, Gordon. Terrell Smith's been on injured reserve for a while, and Zay Frazier's missed the whole season as well. And then at practice on Wednesday, you're missing your top 4 wide receivers in DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, and I believe Olamide Zaccheaus as well. And it's like, all right, this is all happening in the same place. And then 2 running backs as well, DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. Like, it's not spread around very nicely, even at the defensive line, right? Dominic Robinson and Shamar Turner get hurt last week. The good news is there was improvement on Thursday with some guys returning to practice a little bit more, but still some very real concerns heading into this Bengals game. So I guess let's start with the guys who haven't practiced at all through 2 days. Luther Burden with a concussion, Roschon Johnson with the back injury, Dominic Robinson with an ankle injury, and maybe top of the list here, DeAndre Swift with the groin injury. Now, Luther Burden suffered the concussion against the Bengals. I sort of assume then that he's just not going to play on Sunday, which is not the end of the world if you have all your wide receivers, but DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Olamide Zaccheaus were all limited on Thursday after not practicing on Wednesday, so we need to see some continued progress from them. Roschon Johnson's been kind of a non-factor in this Bears backfield, but his absence becomes that much more important if DeAndre Swift can't go. And Dominic Robinson, just to throw him in here quick, ankle injury, we kind of know that's going to be a multi-week thing, so he's not going to play. But not having Roschon and not having DeAndre Swift practicing is a problem. DeAndre Swift has been on the injury report seemingly every week. Somebody pointed out on Twitter, you can go back and search Ian Rappaport's tweet, and it's weekly. He has a tweet about DeAndre Swift is going to be questionable, and we'll see if he's able to go on Sunday. And he's been able to play every single game, but he's been questionable for at least 4 different games this season. And this groin thing has been on the injury report the last couple of weeks. So despite him not practicing Wednesday or Thursday, I'm can I say cautiously optimistic that maybe he could play? I think the fact that the Bears haven't panicked and done anything at running back suggests that they feel like they'll be fine. Because if somehow both Swift and Roschon Johnson weren't able to go, then you would go into the Bengals game with only Kyle Monangai and Travis Homer as two healthy, active running backs. I don't believe they would actually do that. I suppose they could promote Britton Brown off of the practice squad, the guy they brought in August, late August into training camp, who's been on the practice squad all season. But again, I don't know that they're going to go into a regular season NFL game with even Kyle Monangai, Travis Homer, and Britton Brown as their full backfield there. Like I think they think DeAndre Swift will be okay because they haven't reacted quicker to do more at that position. So I'm, again, cautiously optimistic. That feels like too strong for a guy who he literally didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, but like he has played without practicing very much in previous weeks. So I think maybe it's too wishful thinking. I think they're going to be fine at running back. Receiver, though, when now you've got Cole Kmet limited for 2 days, more Odunze Zaccheaus go DNP to now limited, you have to assume you'll have at least one of those guys, maybe all three, considering the progress from DNP to limited. But, I think you can survive if you're missing one of them. If, say, DJ Moore's not out there, but you got Odunze and Zaccheaus, I guess Luther Burden is going to be one that's out for sure. Like it's definitely going to challenge your depth a little bit because you feel better about one of those guys being gone if that means more snaps for Luther Burden. But like you look at the Bears receiving core at the top, and again, any team, if you're missing your top 3 or 4 wide receivers, you're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel. But like for the Bears, it's more Odunze, Zaccheaus, Burden, all 4 of those guys on the injury report. So that would leave Devin Duvernay and Ja'Day Walker are the only 2 other receivers actually on your 53-man roster. But then they have 3 wide receivers on the practice squad. You've got Miles Boykin, the veteran they brought in this offseason, Maurice Alexander, who was on the Lions practice squad with Ben Johnson before, and then undrafted rookie free agent J.P. Richardson from TCU, who flashed with a few plays here and there in the preseason. I don't want to go into a regular season game relying on any of those guys to play offensive snaps. If they got to come in and play some special teams off the bench just to fill some bodies there, I don't hate that. But like I'm going to need out of the big 4 of Moore, Odunze, Zaccheaus, Burden, I need 2 of those. I need 2 of those at a minimum out there on Sunday. I'm pretty sure we're not going to have Luther Burden. And so that means I need 2 of Moore, Odunze, and Zaccheaus to feel comfortable with this passing game. The good news is they're playing the 32nd ranked Bengals defense. And I know the Ravens were the 32nd ranked defense last week, but they got healthier. They had a bye week. The Bengals are showing no signs of getting better. They just gave up more than 35 points to Justin Fields and the New York Jets. The struggling New York Jets put up a bunch of points on the Bengals. Caleb Williams and the Bears absolutely should not have any issue putting up points, even if you don't have, say, Rome Odunze misses the game. If you got DJ Moore and Olamide Zaccheaus, I think you'll be all right. I don't think you have to have Rome Odunze to score big points on this Bengals defense. I think the Jets did it without Garrett Wilson, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. I know Wilson's been injured for them. I'm pretty sure he would miss the Bengals game. But nonetheless, like a struggling offense can put up a bunch of points. The Bears absolutely can do, even with the injuries they're dealing with on offense. And then just to kind of round out the injury report here, Tyreek Stevenson goes from limited to full, so fully expect him to return to the starting lineup opposite N'Shawn Wright. Then with CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot. I guess I didn't talk about Cole Kmet. Limited both days with the back injury. He's missed the last couple of games, so it's hard to know, like, is this the week he's going to be back or not? But I don't think his absence is, like, desperately hurting the Bears offense, per se, because Loveland has been fine. But it's always nice to have more talent back, and especially if your receivers are hurt, you want to go to more 2 tight end sets. I would much prefer that 2 tight end set is Kmet and Loveland, as opposed to Loveland and Durham Smythe, or Loveland and Ozzie Trapillo, playing that 6 offensive lineman tight end role there. So there's progress for Tyreek Stevenson coming back. There's progress in the receivers that missed some practice but are getting there. But like running back concerns me a little bit, and receiver still concerns me just a little bit in there too. We'll see how healthy they are on Sunday. The fact that the Bears, again, aren't adding free agents at some of these other spots or making any panic moves on the roster suggests I don't think they're too worried, or maybe they have too much faith in their practice squad. We'll see. They can call 2 guys up. Maybe it's a running back and a wide receiver. Maybe it's another defensive back. We will certainly keep a close eye on it on game day. But whatever happens against the Bengals, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here on Locked On Bears. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to go check out the Locked On NFL podcast for even more football talk to get you ready for your football NFL weekend, breaking down the Thursday night game on the podcast in the morning with Tyler Rowland, and then it comes out a second time in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins to make sure they're covering all of the top football storylines. So be sure to check out Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcasts. Come on back tomorrow. On Monday, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.